Hello everyone, my name's Tom Place, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're going to review the 2024 Subaru BRZ TS. Now if you want a sign that there's still a few true rev heads up at Subaru HQ and all those sensible folk, then the BRZ has to be it. The BRZ has been on sale in Australia for about 2 years now, and during that time it's gained a real reputation for being a great value buy for the money, but that doesn't mean that it can't get better. In 2024, we've introduced a few new things to the range, most notably AEB on manual models, but also this new TS grade, a much beloved spec of the previous generation. Of course, this model's twin under the skin in the Toyota GR86 is set to launch its own version of the TS a bit later on this year. That's referred to as the performance pack of the GTS rather than a standalone grade like this one. And that's great news for everybody, because just like with the regular BRZ and GR86, they're expected to offer two unique flavors of the same great dish. But the question I want to answer today is, does the TS grade of the BRZ and its litany of upgrades come together to form a machine which is significantly better than the BRZ without compromising what made the original model great? Well, today we're going to find out. But before we jump into today's video, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below on your thoughts on the Subaru BRZ. And also, don't forget to go follow us on the socials, Instagram, TikTok, we'd love to see you there. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. So what's changed for 2024? Well, the biggest change has without a doubt been the addition of AEB across the entire manual range, not just the TS I have in front of me. And that's brought with it not just AEB, forwards AEB I should say, but also adaptive cruise control and lane departure warning. So all good safety tech there. Notably though, we don't have reversing AEB like we do on the automatic equipped BRZ grades. Now this has unfortunately come with a bit of a price hike. It's only gone up by $700 on the automatic variants, but the manuals, look, it's about $3.5 grand on top of what it used to be, which is a little bit unfortunate. So the TS I have beside me though, that's about $48,690. So look, combine that together and that's about $7 grand extra on top of what you used to pay for an S. But this TS, I do think, stacks up in terms of value. So what have they changed? Well, let's start with some appearance stuff. So there's some fairly basic additions, like for example, you've got darker exterior touches on your mirrors here, your shark fin antenna, and of course you've got TS badging down here and all around the car and inside, as we'll have a look at in just a second. There is some stuff that has stayed the same. For example, we've still got the same 215mm wide Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tires, great tire, that one as we'll discuss in a minute. We also have the same 130mm ground clearance despite the addition of the new suspension. So what is that new suspension? So Subaru has done a little bit of a combination here. At the front, we've got these new Hitachi Azimo front shock absorbers, and at the rear, we have a retuned version of the existing suspension setup. But that's not the only thing they've changed. They've also put a pretty sizable Brembo brake kit package on this one. We've gone from 2 pistons at the front and 1 piston at the rear to 4 pistons at the front and 2 pistons at the rear. Notably, those disc measurements are now 326 mils and 316 mils. They're also wider, which really should help with not just stopping power, but also heat dissipation. So that all sounds very nice, but how does it drive? Well, let's go find out. So what's it like to drive the 2024 Subaru BRZ TS? Well, look, in a word, it's good. You know, just as the regular BRZ is a great thing to drive, the TS, I think, is certainly better again in quite a few aspects. I'm out now on one of my favorite B roads, and it's a B road that's got a pretty heinous surface, you know, like it's not very forgiving to cars that are particularly stiff. So first let's start with what hasn't changed though, and that's the 2.4 litre naturally aspirated boxer 4-cylinder in this one. 174 kilowatts of power, right up at 7,000 RPM. Torque is 250 Newton meters with a peak of 3,700 RPM. Still got a 6-speed manual or 6-speed auto if you wish. Rear wheel drive, you know, that limited slip diff at the rear. It's a great recipe for a lot of fun. Now with the change to the suspension, I do think it has changed the driving demeanor a little bit. So the regular BRZ, it has a bit of a reputation for being a bit softer, a bit more wallowy, and a little bit more understeery than the Toyota GR86. And look, I'm glad that both of them exist, you know, like, because I think that really does cater to different driver preferences out there. I like more of an oversteery balance personally, but it's great how forgiving and fun this thing is when you're just driving on a regular road. I think it's definitely a little bit more sharper, this suspension setup, you know, like you turn in, it's really quick, it's really nice, and it's definitely an improvement over the regular BRZ. Now, as I said, I'm on a pretty bumpy road right now, and look, it does start to expose a bit of a weakness of a firmer suspension setup. You know, if you've ever gone out with adaptive dampers and ramped it right up, you'll know what I mean. You do get a bit more firmness, a little bit more body control, but unfortunately, you do also lose a little bit in compliance, and that can lead to some moments where the wheel isn't really touching the ground as much as it should be. So it's not always necessarily a good thing to have a firmer suspension setup. However, Subaru has made a point of the fact that they had this in mind when they were tuning the suspension, or in case of the front suspension, swapping to a new shock absorber. And look, the end result is that on B roads, yes, it's probably going to be a little bit less comfortable, but I do think that overall it's going to be quicker. And if you head out onto a track, I think you would see a pretty significant difference. Now, with the car cornering flatter and harder, it is notable that the tyres seem to be the next weak point. You know, still 215s with a square setup, and I definitely think that there probably could have been a little bit of change there, just a slightly wider tyre on that one Subaru, but you know, I don't think that's particularly hard to do in the aftermarket. And we've got to keep in mind that the price difference is $3,600. You know, for a big brake kit on all four corners and a new suspension setup, I think that's pretty good value. So what about everyday drivability? Well, look, just like the regular BRZ, there is an unfortunate amount of road noise in this vehicle on the highway. It's pretty darn loud. But in terms of the suspension, as I said, it's a little bit more firm, but I don't think it's to the point where I wouldn't want to drive it. You know, I think overall it's fairly compliant indeed over most of the bumps that you're going to encounter. If you've got a bad back, look, I'd say maybe give the regular BRZ a test drive as well. But it's great that we have the ability to choose. And it's also great that we have the ability to go out and test drive what this firmer suspension setup is like. You know, in a previous life, I had an ND Mazda MX-5 and I fitted it with some aftermarket suspension. And there weren't many reviews around, even though it was a fairly reputable brand, and I wasn't happy with the finished product. So in the end, it kind of ended up going down the drain. So the suspension's one thing, but what about the brakes? Now, I think this is actually the real highlight of the TS grade. The suspension's nice, but personally, the value for money that comes from this brake kit just makes a heck of a lot of sense. They're pretty big in size, you know, 4 pistons at the front and 2 pistons at the rear, and they're by Brembo, you know, they know a thing or two about brakes, funnily enough, and I think the result is just really quite impressive. Now, we performance test all the cars that come through the Chasing Cars garage, and the BRZ is no exception. And coming from 100 kilometers an hour to a complete stop, it was able to do it in 33.8 meters. And interestingly enough, we also had a Porsche 911T on the day as well, you know, a pretty serious performance car, and it was able to do the same feat at 33.54 meters. So like a difference of less than 300 mil from a significantly more expensive car compared to the BRZ. Now, I'm not going to pretend that it's comparable on any other metric, but braking, you know, that's pretty impressive. And I do think also, because we've got that larger size, that heat dissipation on a large track day is going to be significantly more improved. Plus, it's only just a touch over 1,200 kilos, this thing, so it's not like it's got a lot of car to stop. So really, I do think that is the key upgrade of this TS. But if you're not quite convinced that the TS is worth the cash, it's also notable that we have Subaru's EyeSight technology on all manual models. You know, and that brings with it, of course, forwards AEB, not rearwards AEB, as I said earlier. Though we do get lane departure warning and adaptive cruise control. And look, in general, I found them to work quite well. Please no one tell my mum, but I have had the AEB go off a few times in some traffic, you know, in circumstances where it should have. Sometimes it was a little overzealous, I'll say, you know, jumping it a little bit too early, and it's like, yes, you know, I do indeed see the car slowing down in front of me, but in general, I think it's a great safety feature to have. And I think it does also make a meaningful difference to the ownership proposition. You know, like a lot of these cars will be people's pride and joy, and they're not going to be as confident giving this car to their relatives. But now it's got AEB, you know, if the driving skill of the person you're handing the keys to isn't that crash hot, I think you can take a little more confidence in the fact that your car's going to be okay if they get back, I suppose. So look, it's great to see some continuous development from Subaru on that front, though really, I do think this model should have launched with AEB in the first place. So what's the interior of the BRZ TS like? Well, let's talk about the fundamentals to start with. I really do enjoy the seating position of this model. You've got nice and clear view here. You've got a nice small steering wheel that comes to hand, little toggles here for your multimedia and other matters. And you've also just got some nicely spaced pedals, a shifter which is easy to reach, and a handbrake which is also easy to reach for parking at speed, shall we say. But what about the tech? Well, look, we've got a nice 8-inch display here, which is fairly crisp and reasonable, I'd say. Wide Apple CarPlay and wide Android Auto, which I will say has caused me a little bit of strife this week because we have our USB ports plugged in here, and that's kind of where your phone has to go and also where the cup holders are. And it's a bit of an art to fold it shut, because that's really the only way that you can get a proper armrest. So a little bit of an ergonomic annoyance there, but nothing too major, I'd say. We do have some other things that I like about this cabin though. You know, vents are really aimed at your face quite well. We also have some physical climate control buttons down here, which is all very lovely, and dual zone climate control, so you're not fighting with your partner all the time. Ask me how I know. Down here we have some heated seats, which is very lovely. Got these old style switches. Personally, I kind of prefer the switches over things which are buried in a touchscreen or even just naturally here, because the benefit of switches is they don't turn off every single time you get out of the car. And if you're in a season like winter where it's going to be cold every day, it's nice to get in the car, not worry about it, and you know, it's one less thing you have to turn on. So look, maybe that's just a personal preference of mine, but I don't know. Do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments down below. So what's changed in this TS? Well, let's start by looking directly ahead of us. We've got a 7-inch digital driver's display, same generally as before, except we've got some STI badges in there. I don't know, personally that doesn't really sit well with me, considering that this is not technically an STI product, just a tuned by STI. I don't know, we can be pedantic over that one, but that's just a personal preference. The more meaningful change, I think, is the addition of red coloring to this interior. So previously, the BRZ only offered a black interior combination for both the base and the S grades. This one has added red, and it's got some stitching around here, and it's also got some red leather on the combination seats here with a ultra suede insert. So that's very nice. Previously, if you wanted a red interior, you had to go buy yourself a Toyota GR86 because they offer that one on the GTS grade. But if the BRZ is more your jam, that's certainly very nice that they've fitted it in this new grade. In terms of things that haven't changed and maybe could have, we've still got a 6-speaker stereo in this one. No heads-up display, but you know, whatever, I suppose. We do have a back seat in the BRZ. They're not terrific, though they do exist. You know, they're certainly better than the back seats that you do or rather don't get in a Mazda MX-5, for example. So at least you do have a bit of room to throw your stuff back there. And also, if you are a parent with some young kids, I think you could probably squeeze in a forward-facing seat in there. There are ISOFIX points as well and top tethers, so you've got all those basics ticked off. So it's nice that you do have a bit of flexibility there. Coming around to the rear of the BRZ now, and the first thing you'll probably notice is that unlike the previous generation, you don't have a spoiler here. I personally thought that looked a little bit dorky, and I'm glad it's gone, though you can get one as an accessory if you do so wish. Now, opening up the boot here, bit of a two-part action. You can't really grab the button and open at the same time. First world problems, I know. And we reveal a 201 litre space back here. Look, it's pretty decent, though I should note that unlike the base and the S variant, you don't have a full-size spare here. Famously, you've been able to sort of option them out and things like that. And it does mean that by not having one, it's about 15 kilograms lighter than the previous model. Though personally, I think I'd just ask the dealer to put it back in, but you know, that's just me. You can expand this space a little bit more by putting the seats down, and thankfully on this generation, you're able to just pull a little tab and they fold down like so, revealing a pretty big space which should be big enough to fit 4 tyres, as the claim has always been. So it might be a relatively affordable sports car. Does that mean it's relatively affordable to run? Well, for the most part, I'd say yes. The servicing intervals for this one are every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, and you do have a cap price servicing program that lasts for 5 years and 75,000 kilometres. Over that 5 years, you're looking to pay about $2,529 for the manual. It's about 80 bucks cheaper than the auto if you're comparing the two. Warranty is 5 years and unlimited kilometres. In terms of fuel economy, the official combined consumption claim is 9.5 litres per 100 kilometres driven. For the auto, it's a little bit less, 8.8 is their official claim. And look, maybe I just haven't been driving this thing hard enough, but I've actually been seeing about 9 litres per 100 kilometres driven in this manual today. So look, not bad on that front. I'm sure we all remember those days where the Subaru BRZ and the Toyota 86 were significantly more affordable than they were today, at least in terms of the outright price. I'd still argue though that that relative affordability is still there. Think about it, in today's age, we're paying $70,000 or more for some hot hatches out there, and this is a dedicated front engine rear-wheel drive, and if you so choose, you can also get it with a manual transmission. Even in this top spec form with a manual transmission, the price still starts with a 4, even if only barely with the recent price hike. For the extra $3,600, I really do think this TS grade is worth the extra spend over the S. Honestly, in my research, looking at the cost of the front brakes alone, I don't think you'd even be able to get them, and that's if you do all the manual labor yourself. While it's not as refined or as polished as some hot hatches out there, like the Honda Civic Type R, for example, I do think it's a pretty good thing for the price. And if you're going to hit the track, those upgrades just make a heck of a lot of sense. And even if you're just using this as a daily driver, I don't think the changes to the suspension are going to be too harsh on your back, even if the S probably is still the more comfortable of the pair. But those have just been my thoughts on the BRZ and its new TS grade today, and I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on the matter. Would you go for this one, or would you go for the more affordable variants down the range? Let me know in those comments down below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, but for now, that's all. Thank you for watching Chasing Cars.